Hey, it's Sean from the driver's perspective, and this morning we're installing Whiteline MaxG coilovers, Whiteline end links for the front, and Verus engineering front camber plates. You have your new fancy coilovers, and you're ready to install them, but before you do anything, before you even put the car in jack stands, measure your ride height before you start. That way you have a frame of reference for where the car was sitting, the rake it had, which is also indicative of the handling balance of the car. This is a really important step you don't want to forget, and it's going to be helpful because I want to match these ride heights. I really like how the TRD Lowering Springs work with the car and the rake, so I'm going to try and match this with the Whiteline coilovers. Like an NASCAR guy. Already in the car is a set of TRD Lowering Springs. They came with this car. They lower the car a fair bit. It's about an inch of lowering front and rear, and the spring rates are improved over factory, about 3.5 kg in the front and 5 kg in the rear, so it gives the car a fairly decent balance out of the box, much better than the stock stuff. So we'll be replacing this with the Whiteline coilovers, which have 5 kilogram springs front and rear, which is pretty common for a track 86 or FRS or BRZ to square up the spring rates. Before I change the sway bars out, I plan on experimenting with spring rates a bit. I already have another set of springs to test out, but first I'm going to do at least one event with the 5 kg springs. But these plastic clips right here, they're a bit of a pain to get out. So I'd recommend picking these up from your dealer, popping them in the Whiteline coilovers, and that way it'll just be a quick swap and you don't have to fight getting these out. The bolt's right in the way, so it's not the easiest thing to get to.
Yeah.
I almost look like a professional. The top nut for the Verus engineering camber plates has been machined incorrectly, or maybe the lathe started walking. So the very edge of this this nut here has a flared out lip, so we need to take that down. Just throwing this in the socket in the electric impact, some 800 grit sandpaper, and a little bit of time here and knock that edge down and should be good to go.
On this camber plate, we found a little bit of damage from when they pressed in the upper shock bushing. And so we're going to clean that up with our trusty 800 grit sandpaper. Same process as cleaning up the bushing, essentially. Just put it in there and spin.
Yep. Oh yeah. This is Andrew. Shock assembly is pretty straightforward. There's nothing special about these. The only thing is when you do use the camber plates, you need to make sure you have your aluminum insert on the bottom, and we did our cleanup on the top nut, and you want to make sure you retain these spacers, if you will, that Whiteline provides when you're assembling with camber plates, or if you're assembling with your factory top hat, you're still going to use these, and you'll assemble like this. You want to be careful when you assemble shocks always, or shocks or struts, because you don't want to snap the top. That'll basically end your weekend, and everybody's going to be sad if you do that. So don't do that. Don't be that guy or gal. If you don't know how to use one of these, don't use it. Time to throw the struts in. I set the adjuster midway through the adjustment range at 6 clicks off of full soft or full hard. You always want to go to one end of the adjustment range in your shock or strut and count backwards. That's so you make sure you're basically starting from the same place. You don't end up off, which is really easy to do. So time to put this in, and then move to the rear of the car, and then finally set it down and see how far off the ride heights are, because I'm guessing it's going to be really off, and we're going to be sitting here for another 3 hours adjusting ride height. So it's a good way to spend your Sunday afternoon. Whiteline provides new bolts for the upper strut mount, and you reuse the lower bolt. The bolts face this direction when you install them, and that's because of the load that's placed on the strut and how you want the bolt oriented. And the second thing is the bracket that holds on the ABS sensor is a little bit too close to the strut, so you actually have to put this bolt in first, find it, and then start the nut like that and get that going before you can actually tighten everything down. Otherwise you won't be able to get the nut on the bolt. So just remember, for this lower one, start it like that and finish threading it on.
Well, see, but right, but with,
and if you can have a helper, I would recommend it.
So as you adjust the ride height, what you said, this should stay the same.
A really important note when you're installing your Whiteline coilovers, the factory end links do not work with this installation. The strut moves the sway bar pickup about 2 inches towards the bottom of the car, so the factory end link is just way too long. Get yourself a set of any of the aftermarket end links. I like the Whiteline ones. They're beefy, they're super easy to adjust. Front struts are all finished up. Now it's time to move to the rear shocks. Really easy to get to. Just pick up this carpet. You can take it out even. You can do that, make it nice and easy. Right over here you have two 12mm nuts. Pop those off. One lower bolt, which is 2/17s, and your rear shocks come out. It's a lot quicker than the front struts. There's a lot less to deal with and a lot less to manage. So we'll get these out. We'll transfer over the stock top hats and get the new shocks in the car. So rather than fight all the ball joints and struggle to get the rear shocks out, do yourself a favor, pull this lower bolt control arm. The lower control arm swings out and it makes it nice and easy to reassemble everything. This isn't your average garage spring compressor, so normally you would get something inexpensive from your local auto parts store. You'd have 2 clamps. You would use your drill or an electric impact to compress the spring. This is a little bit more fancy. It lets you throw your shock assembly into this holder and compress the spring much easier. Important thing to note, for the rear shock assemblies, you really want to pass through ratchet, otherwise you're going to be sitting there for a long time trying to figure out how to get these off. If you don't have these, again, just head to your local auto parts store. You can usually rent tools like this, especially if it's just a one-time job. That way you're not stuck with a really expensive tool maybe you'll use once. But something to keep in mind, you do need a few specialty tools for this and it'll all come off. To install the factory top hats, you do need to remove this adjuster knob. It's really easy. Whiteline includes this little Allen wrench. Get it in here. It's on fairly tight from the factory, I would assume. Crack that loose. That comes right off. And then you do have wrench flats here for tightening everything down when you're ready. This is a nylock nut as well, so don't zap it on too fast, otherwise you'll melt that and you're having a really bad day. So you can see this in there. You can see right in there, that's where that adapter interface is. And because these are ride height adjustable by moving the spring perch, it is possible that you'll get this shock into a situation where when the car is in full droop, this spring's going to rattle around. That's what a helper spring is for. But for the recommended ride heights that Whiteline gives you for these, which is between 30 and 60 millimeters lower than stock, this rear spring should really never come out of contact. I have a suspicion it'll be fairly preloaded to get the right ride height we want, so it won't be an issue. But just something to keep in mind. Rear shocks are fully assembled. It was a bit of a hassle dealing with the nylock nut for the top hat that Whiteline provides, but we were able to burn out the nylon and use a split washer because the top hat is steel. In the future, I'd like to see something like just a standard 2 nuts that can lock up against each other. It'd make installation a lot quicker. We lost quite a bit of time fiddling around trying to figure out how to get this to work. If you do not have a pass-through wrench, you can't take these apart. So that's something I wasn't expecting. I was expecting a little bit more straightforward, but that's kind of how it goes when you learn a new car, and it's just something to log for the next time if I ever change out spring rates or whatever. So in these go, and then we're going to be setting ride height, which is the fun part. Suffer with it?
Yeah. Alright, get it.
The installation's pretty much finished up. We got really lucky with ride heights. We did a lot of measuring as we installed them and used these stats from Vorschlag. They had done some really good work with measuring the exact length the shock collar or the spring collar needs to be from the bottom of the shock, and same for the front struts. Got us pretty much in the ballpark. The only one we had to adjust was the driver's side rear. We were able to crawl under there without jacking the car back up. Made a quick adjustment. We got the ride height all back at 13.5 inches from the top of the fender to the center of the hub. So we're gonna go pack it up, do a test drive. I'll come back later for an impression video once I make sure I got all the kinks sorted out, and we'll talk about the coilovers. Till next time, I'm Sean with the driver's perspective.